Hello and welcome to Make It Make Sense with Michael and Marie. So glad as always to be joined by my good friend Marie Pereira. She's a former prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney as well.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing okay, even though you did rush me and made me come on, earlier than we usually do. This doesn't happen overnight, Michael, okay? Or
I
in
hear you.
seconds. All of this
I
needs time.
understand.
I need at least 2 hours.
2 hours?
What do you think?
You mean you don't wake up looking like that, Marie?
No. Thank
You're
you.
shattering all my illusions. I
Listen.
get it, though. I get it. And I'm sorry. I did kind of rush you today, and thank you so much for pulling it all together for all of us today, because today we got a lot to do. First,
Mhm.
folks, we're going to be unpacking a very important, I believe it was 6-3 decision from the Supreme Court. It was handed down last week, I think June 25th, in a case called Mullen v. Doe.
Mhm.
And it really completely strips the federal courts of the power to review non-constitutional challenges to TPS, or temporary protected status terminations. Quickly, I just want to tell you what it is. It's a program established by Congress in 1990. It allows foreign nationals to live and work legally in the U.S. if their home countries are suffering from some ongoing armed conflict or natural disasters, those types of things. That's back when we were an open country, opening our arms, accepting you're sick and you're infirm, and what's written on Ellis Island. But anyway, um, this decision immediately affects, my understanding, is about 350,000 Haitian nationals, about 6,000 Syrians. And what it means is that they're really facing a complete loss of work authorization, immediate threat of deportation back to a country that currently is still struggling from natural disasters back in 2010, as well as other things, gang warfare, a lot of problems there. And Marie and I were going to try to make it make sense for you guys from a legal perspective and a personal one, because as many of you know, Marie is Haitian, and we're going to explain why the executive branch really just got an absolute free hand, which is scary, right? Plus, a little later in the show, folks, we'll take a comparative deep dive into two highly charged Texas juvenile self-defense cases, Cason Allison and Carmelo Anthony. I'm sure many of you have seen this around the internet, and people have been using these two cases to suggest that there are really two different justice systems, one for whites, one for blacks. We'll take a look at some of the facts in the case. We'll let you ultimately decide, but we'll discuss some of the differences and similarities and see what you think about that. And then finally, folks, there's this woman. She took a plea deal. She's a former star forensic analyst in Colorado. Her name is Missy Woods. For 30 years, she was cutting corners and falsifying records and DNA results that cost a lot of people, victims' families, folks in jail. Just recently, a guy was released from jail because his case was connected to one of her investigations. It's probably going to end up costing the state of Colorado about $11 million. So we'll get into that. What could possibly put someone in a position or have the mindset to do something like that, and what it all means? So Marie and I will break all of that down. But Marie, I want to start with this decision regarding Haitians in America under TPS. You're Haitian, and I have to be honest with you. I was aware of the case, but I wasn't connected to it in any way. I was sort of out here somewhere until I started seeing your posts and started seeing how emotional you were about it, started talking to you about it. And I felt it was important that we get this information out to people, what it all means, not only from a legal perspective, but from a personal perspective as well. So let's start there. Tell me about this case from your perspective. I know you've been around Haitians recently with all the World Cup stuff going on. Talk to me about what it means from a personal perspective and how some of the Haitians around you have been affected by this ruling.
Haitians were very disappointed by the ruling because, in essence, the Supreme Court says that once a president gives TPS under his administration, that president can remove TPS. Now, there's a rule under the Administrative Procedure Act that says before removing TPS from a TPS designated country, the government has to undergo a process where they consult with experts on the country conditions, and put together a comprehensive report explaining how the country was that warranted the TPS and how the country is that warrants the removal of the TPS, and that it's safe to return those citizens back to their homeland because the threats are not there anymore, or it's completely different and minimized. Proponents of keeping TPS say even though Haitians have enjoyed the protection of temporary protective status since 2010, that 16 years later, past the earthquake, Haiti is worse than it was when the earthquake was happening, because on top of the damage that the earthquake did, that was really never fully repaired, corruption exponentially grew. Gangs, violence, kidnappings, rapes, murders, no health care, homelessness, education is like kids can't go to school, infrastructure, it's terrible in Haiti, right? So everyone expected that it would just keep being renewed, reviewed and renewed, because the country wasn't getting any better. But with this new administration, the second time around, they say, you know what? Haiti's okay. We could send people back right now. And they didn't undergo the comprehensive report that was envisioned by the Administrative Procedure Act when it was put in place. So everybody ran to court to say, you didn't follow the rules. You can't just stop TPS like this. No comprehensive review. And then on top of that, you clearly put it out there. You don't like Haitians. They eat cats and dogs, and they're murderers
Awful.
and rapists, and they're from shithole countries. You were not even, courteous about keeping your animus a secret because people in your administration just went with it, right? So we're thinking, bring this, to the Court of Appeals, who agreed with us. And they said, you know what, we're putting an injunction in place. You can't do it because the reason why you want to cut TPS is because you just have a racist out view towards the Haitians. And that's not allowed. And plus, you didn't do the report. It didn't stop there. They went to Supreme Court, who decides the law of the land, to settle the dispute. Supreme Court said, you know what? This is not really our lane to make a decision on. Because when you read the caveat under the congressional law from
1990.
1990,
Hmm.
it really said that, the executive has a wide range of discretion in deciding whether to give it or take it back. So they decided to take it back, and it's not our role to force any president to continue TPS. And we don't have to micromanage the review and the assessment behind the decision because it's their decision to make without judicial review. So you're in the wrong place. Basically, we cannot help you. And then they added a nail to the abscess. And I think it was Clarence Thomas who alluded to, and really, even if racism was a part of it, it's questionable whether or not immigrants, people who, were here on invitation or illegally, have the same protection under the Equal Protection Act of the Constitution. That may be something we need to look at, because even if there was animus, did we really violate a citizen or a non-citizen? Is it the same criteria we're looking at? So he put that out there in the atmosphere, and it was basically like, we're not getting involved. It's not our lane. And so because of that decision, in theory, the injunctions are going to be lifted. The plan to terminate TPS can proceed. And now we're just like on pins and needles to see how is it going to happen? How fast is it going to happen? Will work permits, when will they stop? It's a big thing with the work permits because work permits exist because of a lawful status, right? And so when the Haitians were invited to come after the earthquake, some of them were invited to come under Biden's administration under a humanitarian program, like maybe, I think, 3 years ago, when he opened the borders and said, if you're legal here and you have people in Haiti, you could send for them as long as you can prove that you have a means to take care of the person, right? So a lot of people came under that program legally. After the earthquake invitation, legally, Biden, legally. And so all of these people are being affected by this plan to pull TPS. And now we're just wondering, how are they going to do it? When are the work permits that stand under the foundation of the TPS or the humanitarian program, when is it gonna stop? The people need to work. That's the whole situation here. So we're worried about TPS being removed. When is it going to happen? When are the work permits going to stop? And how are they going to organize these planned deportations? What protections are left for the people? It's a very disturbing thing for people who are recipients of TPS, and even for people like myself who are just looking at the plight of the Haitians. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what this was about, and I want people to truly understand, is the power of the executive branch, what they can do, and what oversight there would be on decisions they make over the lives of the people that were invited to be here. And I want to clue in on something you said. Now all of these people, approximately 350,000 Haitians and 6,000 Syrians, are in a position where they don't know what's next.
Yeah.
And their lives, their families, they don't know what's coming next. And that's a problem because the government and the courts just said it can happen on a whim. The president can pull it away for what reason they want, without any kind of process and without any oversight. And that's where I think a lot of people have a problem, because the court said, look, according to that administrative law that was put together by Congress, they said they want to streamline this. The president has the power. Okay, I get that. But I still think, and this is where I want to get your opinion, as America, we're the leader of the world. We want to be the moral leader of the world. We want to be the strength and, Department of War leader of the world, right? But I think it's important that we do things right. So like you said, if you want to change temporary protected status, which the government has the right to do, I say do it right. Go get a report, get something together that suggests Haiti is no longer under the pressures it was when we granted it. So now we're going to rescind it. Here's a timeline of how we're going to do it so people have a sense of what's happening. But none of that really happened here. And quite frankly, the court says it doesn't have to happen. And there's really no one that can make it happen.
But I think it was strategically planned that way to always leave that power with the executive branch, even when Congress created the TPS process and the rules that govern it, right? They always left that discretion door open. So even if they had done the country condition process, right, and came back with every expert saying Haiti is still a doom zone, they still would have had the right to say, and then we are still stopping TPS. So what is the point of an administrative process where you look at the country conditions when at the end of the day, Congress left the power for them to look at the country conditions, riff up the paper, and say, y'all still got to get the hell out of Dodge? What is the point of that? See, that part, I think it gives the recipients of TPS a false sense of security when you're saying, and then the country conditions, they have to examine as if to say, if it's still bad, then you can't do it. You still can do it. So what is even the point of it? It's a joke, for real.
So it sounds like you're indicting the whole TPS program. Are you saying it's not worthwhile the way it is? Because the way I see it is, and I agree with you, I think the courts were right here, quite frankly. The
Oh,
way the law is written,
mm-hmm.
the executive branch is given complete and total authority.
Yep.
The problem becomes when you have an administration like the one we have, and I'm not making a political statement here, I'm stating fact,
Mm.
says things and does things that are utterly racist and against a certain group of people like Haitians, and we can document it. So I don't want to hear all the political stuff. It is documented. It is
Mhm,
on tape. It is
mhm.
written. It is, this administration has expressed really negative feelings towards Haitians. So when something like this happens, how do you separate the two, right? The fact that he's doing it on a whim because he doesn't like a group of people, or is he doing it because they truly feel like it's time to make some changes? That's where the problem comes in.
I think the two evils could exist in one world. They just don't like, black and brown people from some particular countries. And they really do feel that the presence of these people in their own minds, don't ask me how they come up with the formula, that we're draining the economy. That all of these people came here and they got housing when they came, here. And they're all homeless and they're all going to the hospital and having babies and having anesthesiologists and hospitals take care of them. They're all, engaging
Gang members and committing
gang members,
crimes.
and they're all yes, just sucking the taxpayer money, getting in trouble, running people down. Like they put everybody in one negative box,
Yeah,
right?
Marie, I just want to
And
cut you off because I
it's
think
not
that's the
fully
rhetoric.
right. It's
That's
not
the rhetoric they've been putting out for years to set the
absolutely
stage for this type of thing.
right. So they're putting both of it in one box, right?
Yeah.
We we can do what we want, and plus, it's in the interest of national security to remove all of this. And like I said, it's all about money too. So when they put out these narratives, they say illegals. Actually, the Haitians are not illegals because they were invited to come here under the TPS program. Illegal people don't get work permits. First, you get your legalized status, and then you get the work permit. The people who came here under the Biden humanitarian program came here because they allowed them to come. They gave them what's called an I-94 and permission to enter, and they got work permits under that category as well. So they need to stop saying that these people are illegal, because at the moment they were invited and they are legal.
Yeah. And that you listen to that side and they'll tell you that was the problem, right? The Biden administration was too open, let too many people in, and these people are ruining our economy, ruining our country. I categorically disagree with that. So we won't debate that right here, but that's
Mhm,
really at the heart of it. Now, one of the things that this 1990 law says that allowed TPS is that federal courts could oversee any kind of constitutional claim. So, Haitians brought a constitutional claim, suggesting that under the Equal Protection Clause, and you touched on this earlier, that they were being let go on discriminatory basis, racial
mhm,
animus, which is
mhm,
something you cannot do. Well,
mhm,
Judge Alito, they looked at this, right? Because they can look at that constitutional claim. That's the one
mhm,
area that the
mhm,
courts can look at. And here's what Justice Alito said, writing for the majority. He noted that while political discourse has become increasingly jarring, this is how
mhm,
he did political discourse, not the discourse from one side, political
mhm.
discourse. The official policy decisions put forward by the administration could be justified on race neutral grounds. Um, and the idea being that the country is doing better and it's time to send folks home or give them the opportunity to go home. So, what do you make of that? This idea that they're saying what we've heard and what we've seen coming out in this political discourse um, doesn't amount to racial animus, and this is just a um, race neutral grounds for sending people back.
And I think they added, and I'm paraphrasing, it's race neutral because they're just not doing it to Haiti. They're targeting all of the people.
Yeah,
So it's not targeted specifically for Haitians and Syrians, because they're making a move to remove TPS from nearly all of the 17 countries that are under the TPS umbrella right now. So it's not about race, it's about just trying to end TPS. I think there was wording in there that supported that too. I think it's a bunch of baloney. I
mm,
think they're turning a blind eye on purpose. And if turning a blind eye were six people, it would be all of those who supported that position. Because you're not about to look at me and tell me that there was no race taken into account when they decided to cut TPS Haiti and match it along with all of those nasty, disgusting profiles that they put on Haitians unjustly? And then you're looking at other countries where recently we're inviting refugees from South Africa and giving them, and I'm going according to something I saw on CNN, gift bags
Yes.
with little iPads and the Constitution and saying, "Come on in, we side with you," but only they claim, but that's not, it wasn't talked about in the decision. This is an aside.
No, it
They said
shows the just, the utter just madness that's going on. They're
madness, and
saying
they're
to
like,
white
and
South Africans,
right, but
"Come
they're
on in.
Africans.
Come
They're
on in, and here's a gift
Africans.
bag. Haitians, you've been here, and quite frankly, you're productive citizens. You're working, you got work permits, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but you gotta get out." I
There
mean,
is
the irony is ridiculous.
there's no, they're saying there's no equal protection for immigrants and non-immigrants. It's totally different, but not no equal protection, but
Right.
we're
Lesser.
not.
Let me read that now. I was going to get to
Okay.
that. This is Justice Clarence Thomas. And the
Okay.
reason, and we'll talk about why this is important. He said this was a concurring opinion. So it doesn't make the law of the land, but I'll tell you what it does do. But I'll read it first. Justice Clarence Thomas, he said he was asserting a strict view that when
Hmm.
non citizens outside or at the margin of the constitutional framework they have heavily restricted equal protection rights against the federal government in immigration matters. So he's not specific. He's just saying non-citizens
Hmm.
outside the margin of the constitutional framework. So folks who are here maybe illegally or under certain programs may have lesser rights under the equal protection clause.
Hmm.
And what that does, again, it's a concurring opinion, so it's just his opinion, doesn't really have force and effect as the majority opinion. But what this does, and we see it constantly, he's been doing it in a lot of cases and throughout history, what this does is the justices are saying to folks out there, hey, we're ready for this idea. So bring your cases that can challenge the idea that these illegal immigrants or folks outside the framework of the Constitution may have less rights. We're ready for that idea. Bring those cases so we can further restrict rights. That's what he's saying.
Opening debate, right? Opening debate and opening interpretations line by line, and a very conservative interpretation of the Constitution. He's
Yeah.
all for that. Letter to letter, black and white, no to the left, no to the right, no looking at, okay, when was this written and what society do we live in now? Is there time for some change in the strict interpretation? He's inviting people to have them look into it. And we already know where it would lean.
Oh, they've looked into it, Marie. Don't think they
Okay.
haven't looked into it.
All
He's
right.
just sending the dog whistle out saying,
Yep.
start bringing those cases that I know you've been looking into. You know, they've been wanting to restrict rights of immigrants and illegal immigrants for years. They make no bones about it. They're not hiding that. So I imagine these cases will start showing up, brought by various conservative organizations around the country to try to continue to chip away at the rights of illegal aliens. Finally, I just want to talk about what the possible solutions may be. I looked at this case and I agree. I said, yes, I think it was according to the law. So maybe Congress needs to go back and say, this is something that's ripe for abuse. We don't want one branch. I mean, our entire government is sort of founded on the idea that there's checks and balances. Maybe we need some checks and balances on this power. I don't know that sentiment is there in Congress right now for something like this, but do you think that might be a solution?
It could be there because Ayanna Presley started the discharge petition and she was able to get a bipartisan vote to move the idea to extend TPS for another 3 years
Hmm.
out of Congress, and it's with the Senate now. It
Okay.
got a bipartisan embrace, which is very unusual. I think about 10 Republicans sided with getting it out from Congress, and it's with the Senate now. And when the Senate gets to vote, depending on the numbers, There may be a filibuster, there may be not, and there's still an opportunity for the president to veto, but we're in that realm now where we're waiting for Congress. And what if, in the perfect world, there is a bipartisan embrace to the notion of allowing TPS for another 3 years without having this happen, cut it off under the executive branch, depending on who the executive is, because that's basically what TPS is leaning on right now. It
Yeah.
depends on who is in the White House.
Yeah.
So let's take it out of their hands, at least for 3 years, and allow Haiti to figure it out. And maybe in 3 years, Haiti may be safe enough to receive their citizens back. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping when you say what is the next step, that somehow Senate and Congress continue and create some new legislation. Ideally, it would be to create a pathway to lawful permanent residence for people who've
Exactly.
been here.
If you're
But
here, you're
right
doing
now,
good things, you're
yes,
living right according
yes,
to American values, then there should be an opportunity for you to stay. It's just awful. Every 4 years, you got to worry about who the president is, and you might be kicked out of the country. I don't think
yes.
that's fair to human beings. Forget Haitians or Syrians or whoever, human beings.
So that's where it matters. It matters who you vote for in Congress. It matters who you vote
Mm,
for in the Senate, because let's not forget the president suggest a Supreme Court justice when the
mm,
spaces allow, but the Senate confirms. So it does matter who the senators are, because the senators put those Supreme Court justices in place solidly after the nomination, right? So
yes.
even though the powers are separated, it really all depends on what party is making the decision as far as those Supreme Court lifetime appointments, right? And then when that fails, and it did fail in terms of, being there in a fair way, representing with a decision that's fair for the Haitians, now there's an opportunity because, like you said, Congress and the Senate could band together and create some type of solution.
Yeah.
Even if it's a thicker band-aid than the every 18 to 12 months review, a whole 3 years, that's what's in progress right now. Or in the perfect world, a lawful permanent solution for those who have abided by the law, who came here legally through invitation, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for right now.
Yeah.
There's
It's a
still hope.
thorny issue.
Not
Yeah.
it's not
Okay.
over.
Good.
They can't just go out and sweep everybody up and say, get out. That's not the way it's going to work. There
Really?
has to be a process. And then there is due process owed depending on how long you've been in this country. It's not all expedited. A
Hmm.
lot of the Haitians who have been here, they deserve to be served with a notice to appear and a notice of, some type of notice. And some of them have other things going on, other applications pending. Some of
Mhm.
them have filed for asylum or still have the right to file for asylum. And in theory, if you have a valid application that's being entertained for a decision, until they take that decision, they can't just boot you out of here.
Okay.
So
Unless
there's
Clarence
hope.
Thomas gets his way, right, and starts stripping up folks of those rights as well.
There are options. So what I would
Good.
say is to, if you've been impacted by this, you need to consult with an attorney. There are a
Yeah.
lot of nonprofits out there. Each situation is different. It depends on how you came here, when you came here, what other underlying forms of relief you have. And based on your situation, there could be ways to keep you here. So I want to stress that it's
Yeah.
not a situation in the perfect world. I'm thinking, it shouldn't be that bad where next week they're flooding streets with ICE agents and knocking on doors and saying, get out. I don't believe it's going to be like that.
Fair enough. All right, let's all put our hands together and say a prayer that that is
Mhm.
exactly the case. And it is good news that there are some Republicans who are supporting the idea that there needs to be some consideration given to this, folks, and maybe they'll get to extend it to 3 years. So we'll keep looking out for that. Thank you for sharing that with us,
Yeah.
Maria. I know, again, like I said, this is something that has been very personal to you and the people that you know and your country, your immediate circle. So thanks again for sharing that with us. I want to turn the corner now and get into something we've been talking about for a while, but I'm going to take a little different look at it. I'm going to put this up. I don't know if you've seen these types of things, justice or rigged jurisdictions, or there was something else put up recently. There's a ton of these with
I
these
have.
two
I've seen
cases. You'd have to have seen them, right?
them.
One of them is Case and Allison. He's the white guy. Of course, Carmelo Anthony is the young black guy there. And what people use these two cases for is this comparison and contrast as to whether the system is different for white folks and black folks. They point to Case and Allison, both involved in um, school violence. Kaysen stabbed a young man in a school bathroom. That young man died. Of course, we know the Carmelo Anthony story at a track meet, stabs Austin Metcalf. Metcalf passes away. Case and Allison, as a result of his case, got 10
Mhm.
years. Um, Anthony, of course, got 35 years. So people look at that, they hear the similarities, and they begin to suggest or using it to suggest there's two different systems. All right. So let's take a look quickly at some of the similarities. I want to look at those and then we'll look at the differences. And I just want to briefly discuss it. I don't want to get too deep into it because I want folks to see these and they can make up their own minds. Okay. I know where I land, but I want to know where maybe how you're thinking about it.
Mhm.
Basically, they're the same kid. They're about 17 years old, two different parts of Texas, both sort of Republican cities. Um, there was this fight that happened on a school grounds.
Mhm.
They ended up stabbing him. They both had a knife, since they both brought a knife onto school grounds. They both claimed self defense. They were trying to suggest they were responding to some threat that they felt.
Mhm.
They both got $1 million bail when they came initially in front of a judge. It was reduced in the case of Case and Allison. It was reduced to 195,000 in the case of Carmelo Anthony. It was reduced to 250,000. They both had to wear ankle monitors while their cases were on. Let's go to some of the differences in these cases. All right, Case and Allison. Um, in that particular case, there was a history
Mm.
between these two guys, a documented history. There had been some previous violence. There was a fight at a prom over a girl, apparently. Um, Case and Allison suggested that a gun was pointed at him by the victim at that time. Over time, there were a lot of threats made on social media. There were text message threads that were shown to the jury, lots of threats going back and forth. Kaysen wasn't innocent in this. He was saying what he was saying. And again, these are 16, 17-year-old boys, and they're going back and forth and they're talking. Um, in the Carmelo Anthony case, you don't have that history. There was some supposition that there was a history between these two, but that turned out not to be the case. So there's that particular difference. In the case of Case and Allison, there was testimony that the victim and video of the fight itself. Of course, we don't have that. We have that. We do have video, but it's pretty inconclusive.
Mhm.
You can't tell a lot by that video. But here, one of the victim's friends actually was making a video of the fight. And when he testified in court, Maria, it was crazy. He said basically, I filmed it because the victim, he liked to film all his fights. So
The victim?
the victim liked to film his fights. Again, kids always looking for, something to put on TikTok. This kid would get at fights and he would have his friend film it. That's what he said on the stand. I'm not making this stuff up. What was on that video? It showed that the victim was the one to throw the first punch. When the kid came into the bathroom, Case and Allison, he had a friend with him, threw the kid threw the first punch, the victim, and then sort of this melee started. Two of his friends jumped the other friend. The two of them were fighting. That's when Casey Allison pulls out the knife and he ends up stabbing um, the victim in the rib. The kid dies. We know the Carmelo Anthony story, right? There's this confrontation over him sitting under a tent.
Mhm.
Four guys go up to him. You can see that in the video. They're talking. There's some mouthing going back and forth. Carmelo refuses to leave. He threatens Austin Metcalf and says, touch me and you'll find out. He puts his hand in his bag. They don't believe he has anything in it. He says, touch me and you'll find out.
You said he threatened Austin Metcalf. He didn't really threaten him. Touch me and you'll find out is not a threat. It's a don't touch me
That's fair.
situation.
But
right?
I, we could debate that. I mean, it sounds like a threat to me. If I put my hand in the bag and with this, he didn't say he had a knife, but puts his hand in his bag and he says, the guy says, you don't have anything in your bag. He says, well, touch me and find out. Yes, it's a conditional threat. I get that. It's still a threat to me. And I think there's a difference there, meaning Case and Allison doesn't make the threat, doesn't start anything, pulls it out once he's attacked. In this instance, there's a conditional threat. We can agree to disagree on that, but that's what happens in the Carmelo Anthony case. All right. So at the end of the day, Case and Allison, he's charged with murder just like Carmelo Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
The jury gets to consider murder, intentional murder, manslaughter, which is a reckless act. Um, if you're reckless and you perceive a substantial risk and you still go ahead and take that risk and it does result in death. Criminally negligent homicide, on the other hand, is when you don't perceive that there is a threat to life and limb and you take an action and it results in death. So they were able to consider all those charges. Carmelo Anthony, that was not the case. They weren't able to consider criminally negligent homicide because the judge felt because of that threat or conditional threat
Mm-hmm.
that showed that defendant, Carmelo Anthony, had knowledge that whatever weapon he had could cause damage because he said, if you touch me, you'll find out, suggesting if you touch me, I will hurt you. I have something that will hurt you. So you can't claim that he didn't know
Right.
that there was a substantial threat with that particular weapon. All right. So just generally, your thoughts. Case and Allison gets 10 years. Carmelo Anthony gets 35. Interesting, before I get your answer, originally, he was convicted under criminally negligent homicide, which the jury decided on 2 years. It would have been time served for him. He did serve some time before he ultimately got out on bail. And the prosecutor went to the judge after it was all over and said, we want to add on an enhancement of a deadly weapon, which is allowed under Texas law. The judge says, yes, I agree, slapped him with 10 years. So he ended up doing 10. It's being appealed by the defense because they're saying, look, the judge doesn't have a right to do that. Once the jury did the sentencing and they didn't consider
Exactly.
the a deadly weapon enhancement, the judge doesn't have a right under Texas law to do this. That's restricted to the jury. They never got to consider it, so the judge can't do it now. That's still making its way through the appeals court. We know Carmelo Anthony. He also chose a jury to decide his sentence. They gave him 35. So just quickly, your thoughts on what that might say, and you can pick whatever aspect of it you want, what this might say about the system. Do you think the outcomes, and again, I don't know about fair individually, but vis-a-vis each other, the difference, the 10 years and 35, you think it's a fair comparison?
I don't think it's a fair comparison because when you look at the totality of the circumstances and breaking down the details in each case, they're starkly different,
Yeah,
right? There was no history between Carmelo and Austin, right? Carmelo's case, Carmelo, as you pointed out, said, touch me and you'll find out. So I think that justifies taking away that I negligently and recklessly murdered him because I didn't know the damage a knife could cause, because you said, touch me and you'll find out, basically saying how deep this knife could go.
yeah,
So the fact that one person could say, oh, um, that other young man, he got to entertain negligent homicide, and so Carmelo's case should have done the same. It's not the same facts because of the mens rea and the intent that came out of Carmelo's mouth, which didn't match. I negligently didn't understand the damage a knife could cause, right?
right,
So we wiped that out.
right.
And the fact that there was acrimony history between the other young man and the victim, who was deemed the initial aggressor, you have somebody that gets into fights so many times that he has a camera crew on on retainer to watch him beat people ass. All right?
Yeah,
And it happened in the small bathroom in a high school. And there was beef between them before. So it was not unreasonable that the defendant, right, would be afraid because there had been issues with them before. So his mindset was, okay, this guy is dangerous. He showed me in the past, what type of violent tendency he had towards me. So I got to be on point, man up, and defend myself. There
Yeah.
was no such relationship between Carmelo and Austin.
Yeah.
So you can't even, when you're looking at self defense claims, they really look at both people and what is their mindset, the
Yeah.
aggressor and the alleged victim, to see what was going on in their minds. Was it reasonable for Carmelo to fear such forcible touching and physical injury at the hands of Austin, who he never even met, to know that that guy could beat people down? He's beat me before. He's has beef with me. There was no such a thing that could create the fear.
Yeah.
Maybe there was some kind of fear, but we never heard it come out of Carmelo's mouth because he did not testify as to what drove him to be so petrified that he had to grab his knife.
Yeah.
What was it? What was it?
Yeah. And the other thing was, and I agree 100%, because one could argue the
Mm-hmm.
size and the sheer number of the other guys could
Mm-hmm.
have caused that fear, but he never told his story.
He never did.
And we never understood why he had a knife. In Case Allison's case, the
Mhm,
jury actually got to hear him. He didn't take the stand. The
mhm.
prosecutors played, he did a 2-hour interview with police.
Ah.
I don't know if an interview exists in the Carmelo Anthony case. I have not seen any evidence of that, so I don't know if there is one.
Mhm,
But if there is one, they never got to hear it or from Carmelo Anthony. In that case, they got to hear his 2-hour interview where he's telling them about his fear, about the history of this,
mhm,
and why he had the knife. So you can say, oh, black guy has a knife, white guy has a knife on school grounds. Why are they treated differently? Well, you have an understanding of
mhm,
why the knife is with one and we don't with the other. And these cases, as you mentioned, a lot of it is subjective about what that defendant is feeling.
mhm,
And you take the totality of the circumstances. You have a obvious bully starting the fight,
mhm,
understand why the kid has the knife
mhm,
and why he responds the way he does.
mhm.
In the other case, you don't have any of that. And I think that ultimately gets to the heart of what the problem is here, right? Maybe if Carmelo had taken the stand, explained why he had the knife, explained how he felt under those circumstances, there would have been an opportunity for the criminally negligent homicide and maybe even for this jury to look at the facts just slightly differently.
There was no prolonged statement from him to a police officer or detective like with the other young man. Like you said, he didn't have to testify. The audio and the video testified for him because it was right after it happened. He gave a statement from his heart when he really didn't have time to come up with a lie. And the statement made sense, and it tacked on to how reasonable was it? That's the word. Was it reasonable what you did? Would an average person in your situation have reacted like that? With Carmelo, we didn't have such a statement because he never explained what was in his heart, his mind, that created that level of fear. But what he did do is when they picked him up, he said, I told him, don't touch me. He
Mhm,
actually said something
mhm,
in isn't that self-defense? He said that too. So he said too little, too much,
mhm.
basically.
Yeah,
And
no
it made
question.
two cases different. This
Yeah,
not the same situation at
no,
all.
no. And once you get juries involved, each jury is going to be a little different, hear and see things
Mhm.
differently. So it's tough to compare under perfect circumstances, and
Yeah.
these certainly are not that. And just in the interest of fairness, I want to point out what the judge did is interesting because I feel like, and I just want to say, if a judge had done that and the defendant had been black, so what I'm saying is the jury decides on 2 years, the prosecution comes back and says, look, we want a weapons enhancement, and the judge slaps him with 10 more years. Had it been a black defendant, not a white defendant, because this again happened in the Case
Mhm.
Allison case of the white
Mhm.
defendant, we would have been screaming, black people would have been screaming, the black community would have been screaming that this was a racist move by the judge. So I just want to point that out, that this judge added on those 10 years because I guess he thought it was the right thing to do. And again, it's being appealed. I have a feeling under Texas law, this might be a problem one of the reasons they still have one of the only 6 states that still have the option for jury sentencing is because they are afraid of rogue judges.
Mhm.
Their history suggests that they don't like that. They want to so much power in the hands of one person is a problem. And this kind of seems like exactly what they don't like. So there may be some problems on appeal. We'll see how that turns out. But to my point, what I'm saying is, had this happened and it been a black defendant, Marie, don't you think it would have been a big, big,
Yeah, it
big
would have
problem?
been. It definitely would have been. It would have been.
Yeah.
It would have been the judge did that because, a white life was, lost and that black boy had to pay. It would have been. But not everything, when you look at it the way you should look at it in terms of analyzing it and looking at all four corners, the totality of the circumstances, and micro analyzing the little details, not everything is racial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. And I think that's important because even though we may call out something and say, hey, we need to look at whether this involved race. We need to look at the Batson challenges in the Carmelo Anthony case because race might have been involved. We want to look at a jury that has no black people on it and question whether race played a role in their decision making. These are all things, not to say that it absolutely happened. It's just we need to be aware that these things are possible and we need to take a look at them. Because again, some people say, well, stop talking about it. It doesn't exist. You're pulling it. No, you have to keep talking about it, keep the conversation going so we can all understand our blind spots and different things. That's my purpose in doing it. Not racist at all or saying white people can't sit in judgment of black people. That's not at all. Ahmaud Arbery had an all white jury.
Yeah,
Excuse me, and they found
exactly.
those guys guilty. So, that's not the case at all. But I think if there's a possibility, I think it's important that we call these things out. All right. So, Marie, I want to move on now to a case that caught my attention. I just want to briefly discuss. It involved this Missy Woods. Now, Missy Woods. This one, it just
Yeah, let's
racks
call
my
her messy.
Messy Woods. That's perfect.
'Cause she messed
Messy. She's a
around.
hot, hot
Messy
mess.
Woods.
Over the course of 20 years or so, this woman um, doctored results, reports. She was a star forensic tester. So she would test fingerprints, DNA evidence, and she started messing with results. And it was caught by an intern. An intern was looking through some records and saw some irregularities and said, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't really make sense. Investigation ensued. This was back in 2025, I believe. And they said, wait a minute, you've been doing this for years. And ultimately, she was charged with 102 counts, cyber crimes, forgery, attempting to influence a public servant, perjury, because this woman would go into court and testify. She was a favorite. And I called her a star forensic analyst because she was. She was the person. She wasn't bad looking. Let me put up a picture of her.
She wa I'll tell
She's
you
gotten older
about
now, but she's not a bad looking woman. Looks make a difference. When we're talking about going in and talking to juries or whatever, she was called to hundreds of cases to testify about the results of her tests and things of that nature. And here's what she said. She said she started doing it because she couldn't keep up with her caseload. So she started cutting corners. She started falsifying records to cover up cutting corners. And it just one thing led to another. So I just want to get your thoughts on this. There's so many levels to this thing. Number one, how could she get away with it for so long? This was over a 20-year time period. I want to talk about the caseloads, the fact that someone felt so much pressure. And again, we'll talk about Missy because pressure, I don't know. Maybe she liked being the star,
no.
but the caseloads is what she claims it was. And thirdly, if you're in the system and you were a prosecutor, defense attorney, there's pressure put on these folks to get things done for certain cases, right? Oh, I need these results right away. I need these results. And the ones that get it done, and the quicker you can get them as a prosecutor or an investigator, the better it is for you. So if the things are happening at a pace that don't quite make sense, you turn a blind eye because you're getting your information. It's saying what you wanted to say, and you just keep forging forward. No one stops to say, hey, well, how is she doing this so quick? And everybody else is struggling with their caseload. Nobody took the time to stop and look at it. You could pick any one of those, but I'd love to get your thoughts on how you see this case and how crazy it is.
It is insane, and that's why I called her Messy Missy. Because at the end of the day, who does that? You take somebody's life in your hands. And the only evidence that's supposed to be most objective, it's not eyewitness testimony. It's not something that you could lie on. And you know what we say, DNA don't lie. And then here you have Messy Missy taking DNA and lying on DNA. That is just horrible because you can get a slam dunk conviction with DNA evidence because they say it's undeniable. So when you have the person testing the DNA, messing around with the results, accusing people of having DNA present when it wasn't, the amount,
Sending people to prison when they shouldn't be in prison.
that is unbelievable. And like you said, why wasn't there a red flag? Because we're not DNA experts, but we know how long and tedious the process is. If she was yanking them out like this, like that, why did it take an intern to say, wait a minute, something is wrong here? Why didn't a DA that's in charge of a case look into it to say, why, this was awfully fast and it doesn't line up with our crime scene? Make it make sense in the interest of justice, not just in the interest of convictions. I'm curious to know the cases where she cut the corners, lied, misrepresented. Were
Well,
they cases where the defendants had private attorneys or public defenders? Because I feel like on both sides, if you had litigators who are really making sure that the prosecutors dotted the I's and crossed the T's in terms of their burden, how did it get past the defendant's attorneys?
that's an excellent point because they would have missed that type of thing as well. I guess she was
Yeah.
really good at what she did. And just to your point, someone a few weeks ago was released. What they're doing now, these are thousands of cases we're talking about. But
Unbelievable.
look, they had to open up all the cases that she was involved in. And just to give you an example, guy had been in jail 12 years. He was just released. Now, prosecutors say they're going to try him again. Okay, that's fine. But he's been in jail um, because of results that she fudged. And that was sort of the main evidence in the case. And obviously, there's other evidence, but he was in jail for 12 years. So that life is ruined. The
Yeah.
other side of this is the victims as well. There was an interview done, I saw on one of the local news stations where a woman whose father was killed,
Hmm.
they had the killer and they were going to take him to trial. But because Messy Missy was the one working on the case, they ultimately had to get a plea deal for much, much less time. And this woman was so distraught that this guy was going to get less time and the possibility of getting out of jail for killing her father because Messy Missy couldn't do her job. So I got to ask you, do you think that there had to have been some mental aspect to this? Now, that's not a part of this case. She pled guilty. The 102 counts, she pled guilty to 4 of them. 8 to 16 years is what the judge will have to decide. And what the agreement says, whatever the judge decides, she's got to serve that time. There's no parole for her. So if the judge says you're doing 10, she's got to do the 10. Do you think that that's enough? And number two, I feel like there had to have been some, I don't know how I could sleep at night knowing I was doing this. Maybe she liked the attention. Maybe she liked being the star of the office, somebody who was better than everybody else. There had to be some aspect of this um, in terms of how she saw this whole thing.
I think it takes a very mentally sick person to be able to live with that every day. And I think in every profession, there are people who are just very nutty. Like you have, nurses in the hospital creating situations where they have to save patients' lives, giving patients medications to stop their hearts and then to resuscitate them. You have even moms making their kids sick so that they can have the attention of the hospital staff. That syndrome. So you, in every situation, like you said, she was the star. So it was like, oh, Missy has this case and she's such the wonderful DNA analyst. You know she's going to nail it because in all the cases she testified, we got convictions. So she was like that bitch, for lack of a better word,
No, you're right.
in
You're
in
right.
a bad way. So maybe there had to be, not maybe, it takes a special type of brain wiring to
Narcissism.
allow someone
Deep,
to do
deep
something like
narcissism.
that. Yes. And
Right?
if it was a situation where she went to trial, they definitely would have had an opportunity to bring in an expert to
Mm.
explain what was going on in her mind. It wasn't like, oh, work overload. For that many years, on that many cases, knowing the significance of the work that you put out, what the outcome is going to be, whether a person is convicted or not,
And you're throwing
she's
you
sick.
possibly innocent people into jail.
Sick.
I don't know. Again, I don't know how you sleep at night. So let me just end it with this. Do you think the 8 to 16 is enough? Is it 8 to 16? Yeah, 8 to 16. Again, we don't know where the judge is going to land, but that's what he has to choose from. Do you think that is enough? It feels to me like she needs to do more time. She's
I think,
dangerous.
honestly, I think 8 to 16 is not a laughing matter, but 8 to 16 is enough on the higher end. It depends on the level of remorse she exercises, and it depends on if there's a situation where there's a, a post plea sentencing type report, how she presents to probation, and if there's a report that recommends something to the judge, or is it a cut and dry? You plead guilty, the judge does it. There's not even an interview with victims or, probation for you to say your remorse or whatever.
No,
It's
they're doing it all. They're going to be victim impact statements. There'll be a pre-sentencing report. The judge will have
yeah.
a full picture of who this woman is before he has his
So
sentence.
maybe in that report, her attorneys, I know, she agreed to the certain amount of years in terms of time frame, 8 to 16, but they could sneak up an evaluation in there from a psychologist or a psychiatrist to explain the mindset of somebody who's codependent, needs to be needed, feels need to be loved, wanted, appreciated, narcissist, something to explain the mental component that could mitigate the judge's sentence because it's a wide range. It's
Yeah,
almost
yeah, I
double.
can see that mitigating the sentence. It doesn't mitigate
Yeah,
the crime as far as I'm
yeah.
concerned. And I would imagine it was even part of the plea deal that it came back 8 to 16. As part of plea deals, a lot of that you're presenting to each other behind the scenes. The defense is doing their work and getting valuations and saying, look, prosecutors, look, we really don't want to go to trial on this. We don't want to put everybody through that. But we've got this information that tells us why she did this. Let's talk about the sentence. And that's how they kind of end up coming somewhere, with the recommendations for the judge. My
Um,
understanding is there's all kinds of investigations going on. It could end up costing the state of Colorado about $11 million to clear all this thing up. So
I,
there's so
I
many
think,
victims.
I think she's gonna have a very tough time in prison. You know how
Mhm.
certain types of prisoners have a tough time, like people who hurt elderly and children and sex offenders.
Yes.
They're gonna see her as the DNA lady.
Yeah.
They're coming for her. I hope that
I,
doesn't happen, but she's the fake ass DNA lady.
yeah.
That's a
There she
problem.
is. Yeah. She did have some
Imagine
struggles. Yeah. No, I
she's the
hear you.
one who put people away when they maybe didn't do it. That part.
Yeah.
Because not every case is a case where if we didn't present DNA, there's sufficient external evidence to prove that that person did that, whatever the crime is beyond a reasonable doubt. Some cases are DNA intensive
Yeah.
cases. So it's not just, oh, just because the DNA was bad doesn't mean the person was innocent. And it could be, but for
Yeah.
the DNA. Those prisoners, I'm sure they heard of Missy. Missy is gonna have a problem.
Yeah,
Deeper
they'll
than a
probably
federal
have to put her.
sentence.
They're going to have to put her in protective custody
Oh,
for a
for
while. But
sure.
I'm 100% sure.
For
And there
sure.
she is. Bye bye, Missy. You're going away, and hopefully, I don't want anybody to be hurt. I don't know. That's not what we're looking for, but definitely want to be careful. All right,
Yeah.
folks. That's going to do it for us today. This has been Make it make sense with Mike and Marie. Marie, again, thank you so much for being with me
Thank
today.
you.
Truly appreciate it and sharing your insights and helping us make sense of some of the legal news that's going on around the world.
Thank you so much for having me. I love these segments.
Yeah, they're fun. They're cathartic, man. We get to talk about stuff that we love and then move on to other things. So, again, we'll be back next week, folks, and look for my article on the comparison between Casey Allison and Carmelo Anthony. I do a real deep dive on it. You want to head to my Substack and check it out. This will be up on YouTube and on my Substack as well. So, again, thank you for watching. Thanks again to Marie. Everyone, you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
And let's not forget, like,
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm still new at this. I'm still trying to figure all that out, but that's right. Anywhere you go, like, subscribe, and please join if you get the opportunity. And if you can afford it, become a paid member to help support all the work that we do. All right, folks.
tell them
Again,
about
thank you
us.
again. Yep, and spread the word. All right, Maria, have a great one. Bye.